Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of the space station and watched his home planet slowly turn below him. Earth looked sick. The oceans were brown instead of blue, covered with thick layers of dead algae and chemical waste. The land masses showed ugly scars where giant machines had torn away mountains for mining operations. Thick clouds of yellow and gray smoke covered most of the continents, making it hard to see anything clearly. The space station called Sanctuary floated 300 miles above the dying world. It was home to the last 10,000 humans who refused to leave Earth. Everyone else had already gone to new planets that the alien government called the Galactic Council had chosen for them. Those planets were clean and safe, but they were not home. Jake turned away from the window when he heard footsteps behind him. Dr. Lisa Hayes walked toward him carrying a tablet computer. Her white lab coat was stained with dirt and chemicals from working in the underground laboratories. She looked tired, but her eyes still showed hope. "The soil cleaning project in Area 7 is working," Lisa said, handing Jake the tablet. "We removed all the poison metals from 50 square kilometers of land. Plants can grow there again." Jake looked at the numbers on the screen. They were small compared to the size of Earth, but they were a start. For 3 years, his team had been working to fix their broken planet while the rest of humanity accepted defeat and moved to alien worlds. The Galactic Council had declared Earth uninhabitable and ordered all humans to evacuate. Most people had obeyed without question. The communication system made a loud beeping sound. Jake walked over to the control panel and pressed a button. The voice that came through the speakers was cold and electronic, translated from an alien language. "Sanctuary Station, this is Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony," the voice said. "You have one final opportunity to accept relocation before we declare Earth a quarantine zone." Jake picked up the microphone. He had been expecting this call for weeks. The aliens were getting impatient with the humans who stayed behind. They did not understand why anyone would want to live on a poisoned planet when clean worlds were available. "Counselor, with respect, we decline," Jake said into the microphone. "Earth is our home, and we are not abandoning it." There was a long silence. Jake could hear the electronic humming of the translation computers on the alien ship. Finally, Counselor Vextar spoke again. "Very well, Commander Morrison. The Council will not risk contamination by maintaining contact with your graveyard. You are on your own." The communication system went quiet. Jake stared at the dead microphone in his hand. That was it. Humanity was officially cut off from the galactic community. No more supply ships, no more technical support, no more contact with the billions of humans who had moved to other worlds. Lisa put her hand on Jake's shoulder. "Think we made the right choice?" Jake looked back at the window where Earth continued its slow rotation. The planet looked terrible from space, but he knew there were still beautiful places down there, hidden valleys where clean water still flowed, forests that had survived the industrial destruction, caves and underground rivers that had never been touched by pollution. Most importantly, there were 10,000 humans who believed Earth could be saved. "Ask me in 50 years, Jake said. Over the next few days, Jake and his team prepared for complete isolation. The Galactic Council had been providing basic supplies like food, medicine, and equipment parts. Now they would have to make everything themselves or find it on Earth. It would not be easy, but humans had survived worse things in their history. Dr. Lisa Hayes spent most of her time in the biological laboratories, working on new plants that could clean poison from soil and water. She had already created several types of bacteria that could eat toxic chemicals and turn them into harmless substances. Her latest project was developing trees that could grow in contaminated ground and actually improve the soil around their roots. Engineer Pete Williams worked on the mechanical systems that kept Sanctuary Station running. Without replacement parts from alien suppliers, he had to learn how to make everything from scratch using materials found on Earth. He was designing new factories that could be built on the planet's surface, powered by geothermal energy from underground heat sources. Dr. Amy Foster led the atmospheric research team. They were studying ways to clean Earth's poisoned air and restore the natural balance of gases that life needed to survive. Her team had already built several small atmosphere processors that could clean the air in limited areas. The goal was to scale up these machines until they could clean the entire planet. Jake coordinated all these efforts while also serving as the military commander for their small group. He knew that staying on Earth was dangerous in many ways. The planet itself was hostile to human life with poisoned air, water, and soil. But there were also political dangers. Some alien species might decide that humans were a threat that needed to be eliminated. Others might try to claim Earth for themselves once the humans were gone. The 10,000 people on and around Earth were not random survivors. Jake had carefully selected them based on their skills and dedication. There were scientists, engineers, doctors, farmers, miners, and soldiers. Every person had a specific role in the plan to restore their homeworld. They had volunteers from every major country and culture on Earth, united by their refusal to abandon the planet of their birth. As the weeks passed, Jake watched Earth from his station window and began to see small changes. The brown spots in the oceans were slowly shrinking as Lisa's bacteria cleaned the water. Green patches appeared in some of the most damaged areas where Amy's atmosphere processors were working. Pete's new factories were already producing basic tools and equipment. The work was hard and dangerous, but Jake felt more hopeful than he had in years. The Galactic Council had written Earth off as a lost cause, but humans had always been good at proving experts wrong. They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters. They had learned to live in deserts, jungles, mountains, and even in space. Now they would learn to bring a dead world back to life. 25 years had passed since the Galactic Council abandoned Earth, and Captain Roy Chen was descending into a world that would have amazed the aliens who had written humanity off as extinct. The massive elevator carried him down through 2 miles of solid rock into the underground cities that humans had carved from the planet's crust. The elevator shaft was lined with lights that stretched down into the darkness like a glowing tunnel to another world. Roy had been born on Earth after the evacuation, one of the first generation of humans who had never known the poisoned surface world that their parents remembered. To him, the underground cities were normal. Clean air flowed through tunnels lined with glowing plants that had been engineered to produce oxygen. Rivers of fresh water ran along channels carved into the rock walls. The temperature was always comfortable, heated by the natural warmth of the planet's core. When the elevator reached the bottom, Roy stepped out into Central Cavern, a space so large that it had its own weather system. Artificial suns hung from the rocky ceiling, providing light for the vast forests of modified trees that grew in soil beds built on terraced levels. Thousands of people lived and worked in buildings carved directly from the cave walls. Children played in parks where grass grew under electric suns that never set. Dr. Amy Foster was waiting for him at the geothermal power plant. She was now in her 50s with gray hair and lines around her eyes, but she still moved with the energy of someone who loved her work. The power plant was built around a natural hot spring that rose from deep in the earth. Steam from the superheated water turned giant turbines that generated electricity for the entire underground city. "Roy, you need to see this," Amy called out, pointing to a holographic display that showed energy production numbers. "We are now producing 400% more power than we were using on the surface before the collapse." Roy whistled in amazement. The humans who had stayed behind had not just survived. They had created a completely new way of living. Forced to work with a dying planet, they had developed technologies that the Galactic Council could never have imagined. They had learned to use geothermal energy, underground water sources, and artificial ecosystems in ways that were more efficient than anything that had existed before. Engineer Pete Williams joined them, wiping grease from his hands with a dirty cloth. He was older now, with gray hair and a beard, but his eyes still sparkled with the joy of solving mechanical problems. Pete had spent the last 25 years designing and building the systems that kept the underground cities running. "The new carbon conversion plants are online," Pete reported. "We are actually pulling more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere than we are putting in. At this rate, we will have breathable surface air in 15 years. Roy shook his head in wonder. The surface world that his parents had fled was slowly being healed by machines that worked day and night to reverse centuries of damage. Atmospheric processors now covered large areas of every continent, slowly cleaning the air molecule by molecule. Ocean purification plants worked to remove toxins from the water. Soil restoration teams used specially designed bacteria and plants to remove heavy metals and chemicals from the ground. "Any word from the surface teams?" Roy asked. Amy's expression grew excited, and she smiled in a way that made her look years younger. "Better than word. They have made contact." Roy felt his blood turn cold. Contact with whom? For 25 years, Earth had been completely cut off from the galactic community. No alien ships had come to check on the planet. As far as the Galactic Council knew, All humans on Earth had died decades ago. Contact with whom? Roy asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Remember the Clethak trading ships that used to skip our system? Amy asked. Apparently they have been monitoring our progress. 3 of their vessels just requested permission to land. Pete grinned widely, showing teeth stained by years of drinking recycled water. Seems word is getting out that Earth is not quite the graveyard the Council claimed it was. Roy's mind raced. The Clethak were an independent trading species that operated outside of Galactic Council control. They were known for being practical and interested mainly in profit, rather than politics. If they were asking permission to land on Earth, it meant they had detected signs of advanced civilization and wanted to establish trade relationships. Where are they planning to land? Roy asked. Central Park, Amy replied. Or what used to be Central Park. It is now our primary surface demonstration site. Roy knew the area well. Central Park had been one of the first places where the surface restoration teams had tested their new technologies. What had once been dead ground covered with toxic soil was now a thriving forest ecosystem. Clean streams ran through carefully maintained wilderness areas. The air there was pure enough to breathe without filters. How long before they arrive? Roy asked. 6 hours, Pete said. Jake Morrison is already on his way up from the deep cities. This will be the first time in 25 years that humans have spoken face-to-face with aliens. Roy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. For his entire life, humans had been working in isolation, focused on the enormous task of healing their planet. They had developed incredible technologies and built amazing underground cities, but they had done it all without any outside contact. Now they would have to prove to alien visitors that Earth was not the dead world that everyone believed it to be. What do we know about Clethak psychology? Roy asked. How do we approach them? Amy pulled up files on her computer tablet. According to the old databases, they are primarily motivated by trade opportunities and technological innovation. They respect species that can solve difficult problems and create valuable products. They are not interested in politics or territorial expansion. Pete nodded. In other words, they are exactly the kind of aliens we want to meet first. If we can impress them with our restoration technologies, they might become our first trade partners in decades. Roy thought about the implications. Trade with an independent alien species would give humanity access to resources and technologies that could accelerate the healing of Earth. More importantly, it would prove that humans were not extinct and that Earth was not a dead world. Word would spread through the informal networks that connected trading species across the galaxy. We need to show them everything, Roy decided. The atmospheric processors, the underground cities, the soil restoration projects, the carbon conversion plants. They need to understand that we have not just survived, we have thrived. Amy and Pete nodded in agreement. They had spent 25 years working in secret, hidden from the galaxy that had written them off. Now they would have their first chance to show what human determination and ingenuity could accomplish when faced with impossible odds. As Roy rode the elevator back up toward the surface, he thought about his parents' generation and the choice they had made to stay on Earth. Everyone had called them crazy for refusing to evacuate to safe, clean alien worlds. The Galactic Council had predicted that all humans on Earth would die within a few years from exposure to the planet's poisoned environment. Instead, those humans had built a new civilization from the ground up. They had learned to live underground when the surface was too toxic. They had developed new technologies to clean air, water, and soil. They had created sustainable ecosystems that could thrive in artificial environments. Most importantly, they had never given up hope that Earth could be restored to its former beauty. Now that work was about to be tested by alien eyes for the first time. The 3 Clethak ships landed in what had once been Central Park, with barely a whisper of sound. Their vessels were sleek and organic-looking, more grown than built, with surfaces that seemed to shift color in the afternoon sunlight. Ambassador Zekthar emerged from the lead ship, moving with the careful grace of a creature that had evolved in low-gravity environments. General Kate Brooks watched the aliens step onto Earth soil for the first time in 25 years. She had been chosen to lead the first contact team because of her combination of military experience and diplomatic training. At 53, Kate had spent most of her adult life preparing for this moment, though she had never been sure it would actually come. Zekthar stood nearly 8 feet tall, With 4 arms that ended in delicate manipulator hands and compound eyes that could see across a much wider spectrum than human vision, the alien's body was covered in a chitinous exoskeleton that resembled polished wood, and it moved with the fluid motions of something that was part insect and part plant. When it spoke, the words came through a small translation device attached to its chest. This area was listed in council records as a dead zone, Zekthar said, gesturing with one of its 4 arms at the thriving forest around them. Toxic soil, contaminated groundwater, unbreathable atmosphere. Kate smiled, trying to project confidence and friendliness despite her nervousness. This was humanity's first chance to make a good impression on the galactic community in over 2 decades. Everything had to go perfectly. That was accurate 25 years ago, Kate replied. We have learned to work with our world rather than against it. Dr. Sam Rodriguez stepped forward with a portable holographic projector. As the lead xenobiologist, Sam had spent years studying alien psychology and communication methods in preparation for eventual contact. The hologram showed Earth's current atmospheric composition, with clean percentages of oxygen, nitrogen, and other gases necessary for human life. We discovered that our dying planet was actually incredibly resilient, Sam explained. The damage was not permanent. It just required technologies the Council had never developed. Zekthar's compound eyes focused on the holographic data, and the alien made small clicking sounds that the translation device did not interpret. After several minutes of study, Zekthar looked up at the humans with what might have been surprise or confusion. Your carbon processing methods exceed anything in Council archives, Zekthar said. Your energy efficiency ratios are impossible according to our physics. Not impossible, Kate corrected gently. Just desperate. When you are facing extinction, you either innovate or die. We chose innovation. Kate led the Clethak delegation on a walking tour through the restored parkland. Ancient oak trees that had been dead for decades now stood tall and healthy, their leaves green and vibrant in the clean air. Streams of crystal-clear water flowed through carefully engineered channels, supporting fish and aquatic plants that had been extinct on Earth for a generation. The grass under their feet was thick and soft, growing in soil that had been completely sterile just 25 years earlier. Zekthar stopped beside one of the restored trees and reached out to touch its bark with what appeared to be reverence. The alien's translation device made soft humming sounds as it processed the emotional context of the gesture. The Council believes humanity died out 20 years ago, Zekthar said quietly. They allocated your former colony worlds to other species. We know, Kate replied, her voice carrying a note of sadness. We have been monitoring their communications. The question is, what do we do about it? A second Clethak, introduced as Trade Minister Velnoth, stepped forward. This alien was shorter than Zekthar but broader, with arms that looked stronger and more suited for heavy work. When Velnoth spoke, its translation device produced a voice that sounded more businesslike and practical. We propose an alternative to Council contact, Velnoth said. The Clethak Confederation values innovation above politics. We would be honored to establish discrete trade relations with New Earth. Sam raised an eyebrow at the unusual terminology. New Earth? Zekthar made a sound that the translation device interpreted as laughter, though it sounded more like wind chimes than human amusement. Earth is dead, according to Council records. This thriving world we see before us must be something else entirely. Kate understood immediately. The Clethak were offering humanity a way to re-enter galactic commerce without directly challenging the Galactic Council's official position. As far as the Council knew, Earth was still a lifeless quarantine zone. But if a previously unknown planet called New Earth happened to be inhabited by a species that resembled humans, that would be a completely different matter. What kind of trade relationships are you thinking about? Kate asked. Velnoth gestured toward the restored forest around them. Your environmental restoration technologies would be extremely valuable to species dealing with industrial pollution or natural disasters. Your closed-loop life support systems could revolutionize space travel and planetary colonization. Your energy efficiency improvements could benefit every technological civilization in the galaxy. Kate felt a surge of excitement. For 25 years, humanity had focused entirely on survival and restoration. They had developed incredible technologies, but only for the purpose of healing Earth. The idea that these innovations might be valuable to other species had never been seriously considered. In exchange, Zekthar added, We could provide access to rare minerals, advanced manufacturing techniques, and information about galactic political developments. The Confederation maintains trade relationships with over 300 species across 47 star systems. Sam's mind was racing with possibilities. We would need to establish formal diplomatic protocols, security arrangements, technology transfer agreements. Of course, Velnoth agreed, but such arrangements could be made quietly, without attracting council attention. The Confederation has considerable experience in managing discrete relationships. Kate looked around at the restored parkland and thought about the underground cities, the atmospheric processors, the carbon conversion plants, and all the other miraculous technologies that humanity had developed in isolation. For the first time in 25 years, she began to imagine a future where Earth was not just healed, but connected to the wider galactic community. We would need to discuss this with our leadership, Kate said carefully. This decision affects not just Earth, but the future of our entire species. Naturally, Zekthar replied. We are prepared to remain in orbit for several days while you consider our proposal. However, I should mention that our surveys detected significant industrial activity on your planet. Other species may also take notice of your recovery. Kate felt a chill of concern. What kind of other species? Mining consortiums looking for new extraction sites, Velnoth explained. Salvage operations seeking abandoned technology. Colonial expansion groups searching for empty worlds to claim. If word spreads that Earth is no longer dead, you may receive less friendly visitors. The implication was clear. Humanity's secret could not be kept forever. Eventually, someone would notice that Earth was alive again, and not all alien species were as reasonable as the Clethak. Some might see a restored Earth as a prize to be claimed, rather than a partner to be respected. How long do we have? Kate asked. Zekthar's compound eyes reflected the light filtering through the forest canopy. Based on normal survey patterns, perhaps 5 to 10 years before systematic exploration reaches this system. However, if someone specifically investigates rumors about Earth's recovery, it could be much sooner. Kate nodded grimly. The human leadership would have to make some difficult decisions very quickly. They could try to maintain their isolation and hope that Earth remained hidden from galactic attention, or they could take the risk of establishing trade, relationships, and gradually building alliances. That might protect them when their secret was finally revealed. As the Clethak delegation prepared to return to their ships for the night, Kate looked up at the clean blue sky above the restored forest. 25 years ago, this spot had been dead ground under a poisoned atmosphere. Now it was a garden that could serve as a model for environmental restoration throughout the galaxy. The question was whether humanity would have the chance to share their hard-won knowledge with the stars, or whether they would have to fight to defend the world they had worked so hard to heal. 50 years after the Galactic Council abandoned Earth, Admiral Ben Carter stood in the command center of Phoenix Station, the massive orbital shipyard that circled the planet like a metallic moon. Through the reinforced windows of the control room, he could see the latest class of vessels rolling off the production lines. These ships were unlike anything the Council had ever seen, built with human engineering principles that prioritized adaptation and durability over elegance and efficiency. The ships emerging from the construction bays were robust and practical, designed to operate in harsh environments and survive damage that would destroy more delicate Council vessels. Their hulls were thick and layered, able to self-repair minor damage using nanotechnology derived from the biological systems that had restored Earth's ecosystems. Their engines were powered by fusion reactors that could run on almost any available fuel, making them independent of specialized supply chains. Commander Nina Torres approached Ben's position, carrying a data tablet filled with communication reports from across the galaxy. At 35, Nina represented the generation of humans who had been born after Earth's restoration began. Raised in the underground cities and trained from childhood to think in terms of galactic politics and interstellar trade, her perspective was very different from that of the older generation, who remembered the dark years when humanity had been isolated and struggling to survive. Status report. Commander Torres, Ben called, not taking his eyes off the ship construction below. Nina consulted her display, scrolling through dozens of messages that had arrived through the secure communication networks that humanity had established with their trading partners. 17 independent systems have requested Earth technology exchanges. The Rex Republic wants our atmospheric processors for their industrial worlds. The Thanari Collective is offering rare metals for our bioengineering patents. and the Outer Rim colonies are practically begging for our closed-loop agricultural systems. Ben nodded with satisfaction. The network of relationships that humanity had built over the past 25 years now spanned a significant portion of the galaxy. Most of their trading partners still believed they were dealing with a previously unknown species called Terrans who inhabited a planet called New Earth. The fiction had become increasingly elaborate over the decades, but it allowed humanity to operate without attracting the attention of the Galactic Council. Through the observation windows, Ben could see Earth below, and the sight still filled him with wonder. Blue oceans reflected white clouds that drifted across green continents. The planet looked more alive and healthy than it had in centuries, perhaps more beautiful than it had ever been in human history. The atmospheric processors had not just cleaned the air, they had optimized it. The soil restoration projects had not just removed toxins, they had enriched the ground to support incredible biodiversity. The ocean purification systems had not just filtered out pollutants, they had rebalanced marine ecosystems that were now more productive than ever before. Dr. Helen Park joined them at the observation windows, carrying her own set of reports about xenological developments across the galaxy. As the chief of alien studies, Helen was responsible for monitoring political and social changes among the various species that humanity traded with. Her work had become increasingly important as Earth's network of relationships expanded and became more complex. The interesting thing is that most of our trading partners do not even realize they are dealing with humans, Helen said. Watching a transport ship launch from the planet's surface toward one of the orbital stations. They think we are a previously unknown species called Terrans who happen to look similar to the extinct humans. Ben chuckled at the irony. How long do you think we can maintain that fiction? Maybe not much longer, Nina said, pointing to her communication display with a concerned expression. We are getting reports that Council survey ships have been detected in the outer system. They might be planning a return visit to check on their old quarantine zone. Helen's expression grew serious as she considered the implications. After 50 years, they want to see what happened to their failed experiment. Ben straightened his uniform and felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. For 5 decades, humanity had worked in secret to restore their world and build relationships with other species. They had developed technologies that exceeded anything in the Council archives. They had created a thriving civilization on a planet that had been declared permanently uninhabitable. They had established trade relationships with dozens of species across multiple star systems. Now all of that would be put to the test. How many ships are we talking about? Ben asked. Nina checked her reports again. Long-range sensors detect a Council exploration fleet consisting of 12 vessels, including 3 heavy cruisers and a science ship. They are following standard survey protocols, which means they expect to find a dead world with possibly some interesting mineral deposits. Instead, they are going to find orbital shipyards, atmospheric processors, restored ecosystems, and a human population of over 50 million, Helen observed. Ben looked around the command center at the displays showing Earth's incredible recovery and the network of relationships that humanity had built with alien species across the galaxy. The planet that the Council had written off as a lost cause had become the center of an unofficial federation of worlds united by trade, technology exchange, and mutual respect. What are our defensive capabilities? Ben asked. Nina pulled up tactical displays showing the positions of Earth's protection systems. We have 47 armed vessels in the system, including 15 heavy cruisers of our own design. The orbital defense platforms are fully operational, though they have been disguised to look like civilian structures. Ground-based missile systems are ready for activation on all continents. More importantly, Helen added, we have defensive agreements with the Clethak Confederation, the Vrex Republic, and 12 other independent systems. If Earth is threatened, we could potentially call on over 200 allied vessels for support. Ben felt a surge of pride at what humanity had accomplished. 50 years ago, they had been refugees on a dying world, abandoned by the galactic community and left to face extinction alone. Through determination, innovation, and careful diplomacy, they had built something unprecedented, a voluntary alliance of species based on mutual benefit rather than conquest or domination. The Council is in for quite a surprise, Ben said. Nina looked up from her communications display with a new message. Admiral, I am receiving a transmission from the approaching Council fleet. They are requesting permission to enter Earth orbit for a standard quarantine zone inspection. Ben smiled grimly. Open a channel, Commander. I think it is time to introduce ourselves. The main communication screen activated, showing the bridge of a Council exploration vessel. Admiral Thexlon, a tall humanoid alien with blue-gray skin and large black eyes, appeared on the screen. His expression showed the casual confidence of someone who expected to find exactly what his records told him would be there. A dead world with no signs of life or civilization? This is Admiral Thexlon of the Council Exploration Service, the alien said through his translation device. We are conducting a routine inspection of the Earth quarantine zone. We require access to planetary orbit for scientific surveys. Ben stepped into view of the camera, wearing the formal uniform of the Terran Federation Navy. Behind him, the command center of Phoenix Station was clearly visible, along with displays showing Earth's restored continents and thriving orbital installations. Admiral Thexlon, this is Admiral Ben Carter of the Terran Federation, Ben said calmly. I am afraid there has been some confusion. Earth is no longer a quarantine zone. It is the capital world of an independent federation, with defense agreements covering this entire star system. The Council Admiral's expression changed from confidence to confusion to shock as he processed what he was seeing. On his tactical displays, Ben knew that Thexlon's sensors were detecting orbital installations, energy signatures, and ship movements that should not exist according to Council records. This is impossible, Thexlon said. Earth was declared uninhabitable 50 years ago. The human species was relocated to appropriate colony worlds. Reports of our extinction were greatly exaggerated, Admiral, Ben replied. As you can see, Earth has made a remarkable recovery. We would be happy to discuss diplomatic relations between the Council and the Terran Federation, but I must insist that any military vessels in our space operate under our traffic control authority. Admiral Thexlon stared at the screen for a long moment, clearly struggling to reconcile what he was seeing with what his records told him should be impossible. Council Fleet Admiral Thexlon had expected to find a dead world, perhaps with some interesting mineral deposits that could be exploited for the benefit of member species. His science teams had prepared instruments to measure radiation levels, atmospheric toxicity, and soil contamination. They had brought excavation equipment to search for any remaining artifacts from the failed human civilization. Instead, his sensors were showing energy signatures that defied explanation, orbital installations that had never existed in Council databases, and atmospheric readings that suggested a garden world more pristine than most Council homeworlds. Admiral, reported his science officer, a thin amphibian creature whose skin changed color with emotional states. I am detecting multiple artificial structures on the planet's surface and in orbit. Some of them are massive beyond anything in our construction databases. How massive? Thexlon asked, studying the sensor displays that showed structures scattered across Earth's continents and orbital space. The primary orbital shipyard appears to be 15 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide. The atmospheric processing installations cover areas larger than most Council cities. And Admiral, I am reading life signs. Billions of them. Thexlon felt his 3 hearts begin beating faster as he tried to process what his instruments were telling him. According to every Council record, Earth should be a poisoned wasteland where nothing could survive. The human species should have been extinct for decades, their homeworld serving as a cautionary example of what happened when primitive civilizations destroyed their environments through industrial excess. Before Thexlon could respond to these impossible readings, his communications officer announced an incoming transmission. The main viewing screen flickered to life, revealing a human face that should not exist. The man appeared to be in his 60s with gray hair and weathered features, but his eyes showed the sharp intelligence of someone accustomed to command. Behind him, Thexlon could see what appeared to be an advanced military command center. Greetings, Council Fleet, the human said with calm confidence. This is Admiral Ben Carter of the Terran Federation. Welcome to Earth. Thexlon's 3 hearts nearly stopped beating. This was impossible on multiple levels. Humans were supposed to be extinct. Earth was supposed to be uninhabitable, and this human was claiming to represent something called the Terran Federation, which did not exist in any Council database. Impossible, Thexlon managed to say. Humans were declared extinct 50 years ago. Earth was classified as permanently uninhabitable due to irreversible environmental damage. Ben's smile was polite but carried an unmistakable edge of steel. Reports of our death were greatly exaggerated, Admiral. We have spent the last 50 years rebuilding our world and developing technologies that allow us to thrive here. Earth is not a graveyard, Admiral. It is a forge. On his tactical displays, Thexalon watched in growing amazement as defensive platforms emerged from what had appeared to be empty space, their cloaking systems deactivating to reveal weapons and shield generators of unknown design. Human vessels, dozens of them, rose from the planet's surface with engineering principles unlike anything in Council databases. Their ships were angular and robust, built for durability rather than elegance, with armor plating that looked thick enough to survive direct hits from heavy weapons. You abandoned us to die, Ben continued, his voice carrying across the void with the weight of 50 years of history. But humans have a saying, what does not kill you makes you stronger. Earth tested us, pushed us to our limits, and we responded by becoming something new. We are no longer the species you remember. Dr. Lisa Hayes appeared beside Ben on the transmission, now elderly but still sharp-eyed and determined. She had been one of the original scientists who had chosen to stay on Earth when the evacuation order came, and her work had been instrumental in developing the technologies that had restored the planet's ecosystems. We have restored our world. Admiral Thexalon, Lisa said, gesturing toward displays that showed Earth's current environmental status. Every poisoned ocean, every dead forest, every contaminated watershed. We have made Earth more beautiful than it was before the damage began, and in doing so we have learned to make any world habitable. Thexalon stared at the readings streaming across his instruments. The energy output from Earth exceeded that of most Council homeworlds. The atmospheric composition was not just clean, but optimized for supporting life. The orbital installation showed construction techniques that were completely unknown to Council science. Most impossibly, the restoration of a Class X death world to Class A garden status was theoretically impossible, according to every environmental model in the Council archives. What do you want from the Council? Thexalon asked, his voice barely steady. Ben's expression softened slightly, showing a hint of the weariness that came from 50 years of struggle and triumph. Nothing, Admiral. We wanted your help 50 years ago, but you chose to write us off instead. We have moved beyond that. Earth is now the capital of an alliance of worlds that value innovation, adaptation, and the refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds. As if to emphasize the point, Thexalon's sensor displays began showing dozens of non-human vessels approaching Earth from various vectors. These were the trade ships and diplomatic vessels of the species that had chosen to work with humanity, rather than follow the rigid protocols of the Council. The Clethak Confederation, the Vrex Republic, the Thanari Collective, and dozens of other independent civilizations that had found human technology and determination to be valuable allies. You called Earth a graveyard, Ben said as his transmission began to reach its conclusion. But we made it a forge, a place where impossible things become reality through determination and ingenuity. You are welcome to establish peaceful relations with the Terran Federation, Admiral, but understand that we are no longer the desperate refugees you abandoned. We are something entirely new. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Thexalon staring at a world that challenged everything the Council thought they knew about habitability, technology, and the adaptability of species. His science officer was frantically recording readings that would revolutionize Council understanding of environmental restoration and planetary engineering. His communications officer was receiving diplomatic overtures from dozens of species that apparently maintained regular contact with the impossible human civilization. Below them, Earth turned slowly in space, not the corpse of a world they had expected to find, but a blue-green jewel that had been reborn from its own ashes. The continent showed the green of thriving forests, the blue of clean oceans, and the white of natural cloud formations in an atmosphere that had been restored to perfect balance. Orbital installations gleamed in the sunlight, monuments to human engineering skill and determination. Thexalon activated his communication system to contact Council headquarters, knowing that his report would shake the foundations of galactic politics. Council Command, this is Admiral Thexalon reporting from the Earth system. I need to speak with the High Council immediately. We have a situation that requires immediate diplomatic attention. As he waited for the connection to Council headquarters, Thexalon studied the tactical displays showing human defensive capabilities and the approaching vessels of their allied species. It was clear that humanity had not just survived their abandonment. They had thrived and built something unprecedented, a voluntary alliance based on mutual respect and technological exchange rather than conquest and domination. The species the Council had written off as too primitive to save had not only survived but had become the architects of their own resurrection. They had transformed a dying world into a garden, developed technologies that exceeded Council capabilities, and built relationships with dozens of independent civilizations. Most importantly, they had proven that determination and innovation could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Earth was no longer a cautionary tale about the consequences of environmental destruction. It had become an inspiration, proof that no challenge was too great for a species willing to work together and never give up hope. The humans had taken their broken world and made it into something better than it had ever been before, and now they were offering to share that knowledge with any species wise enough to treat them as equals rather than subjects. The question was whether the Galactic Council would be humble enough to learn from the species they had once dismissed as hopeless failures, or whether they would repeat the mistake of underestimating human determination and ingenuity. Admiral Thexelon looked at Earth one more time and realized that the galaxy had just become a much more interesting and unpredictable place.